a video on making sauerkraut, which is fermented cabbage, which is easier than you think, and it just takes a little bit of confidence. So what we're going to need is cabbage. I bought a red one and I bought a green one. Could mix them if I want. I'm going to keep them separate. You're going to need some good quality salt, rock salt, not table salt, because that's that's just pure salt with non-caking additives into it. So you don't want that. You want some good quality rock salt. I'm going to try. I've never used that bit on the grater, those slicey things there. So we're going to see if it works with those. Otherwise, I'm going to use a trusty Japanese mandolin. Otherwise, if your knife skills are up to it, you can just use a knife. And then you're going to need a bowl to mix things in, and you're going to need a glass jar or a receptacle. Needs to be glass, not metal, not particularly plastic, because we're dealing with acids, and acids are not going to burn into glass, but they will burn into metal and plastic. So you want to stay away from that. I've got big jars. Now I was thinking about this, and it's not bowls. A glass bowl isn't particularly suitable, and getting hold of large jars, I can imagine, might be quite difficult for some people. So I was thinking about it, and I was thinking what you could actually use is you could actually use a flower, a vase that you use for flowers. And I think that plenty of people have got those kicking around the house, and I think that would be suitable. So you could use a vase, as long as it is that kind of shape vase, and not too wide at the top. So I think that would be very suitable. So there we go, that out of the way. We'll do the green cabbage first, because the red cabbage will make a mess of everything. And we just want to look on the outside, see if there's a mess of anything, or if it's too dirty. But that looks all kind of quite fine. So that can go in the compost. We'll just whip off a little bit of the base, and then we're going to cut it into 6, I think. Yeah, I think 6 is going to be a good size. So carefully, watching fingers. So there, that out of the way, and then it doesn't have to be exact. But I think there, and I think there, like that. So that half out of the way. I'm not going to prep it all on camera because it's a bit boring, isn't it? Don't you think? Yes, don't know what that was. Right, so bowl, and then we're going to see if the grater works first. See if it will. So I've never used that part of the grater. Yes, it's all right. It's a bit thin actually. Maybe don't use that part of the grater. Either use a knife or a mandolin. So have a look at the thickness. Yeah, it's okay. So it must be about that kind of thickness. Can you see? Yeah, that kind of thickness. And what we're going to do is, we don't want the root. A little bit of the root's fine, but we're just always wanting is this. But by keeping the root on, we're going to keep all that cabbage together. So it's just a case of working around the root, and careful of your fingers. So there. So now we're getting down to the root there, so we just need to be careful. So we're going to work on that bit there. And then we'll go down that way. This is probably the part where I slice my fingers. And there's still plenty to do there. Right, so that is that. So then we're then left with just the roots and all that cabbage there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to prep all the rest of the cabbage, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about salt and the next process. But it's pretty straightforward. Will I do the other cabbage? I think, yeah, so that's it. So I'll prep the rest of the cabbage. I don't want to do it on camera. It's a bit boring. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about the next process. Right, so I have shredded all the cabbage, and I picked out any particularly big bits. Those are fine. But if there was any particularly long bits or thick bits, I picked them out just to be sure, just to get rid of them. Now, you just need to be a little bit careful with the cabbage, because sometimes within these bits here you find bits of soil. You don't want those in the cabbage, but you also don't want to wash the cabbage, because it's the natural bacteria that's in the cabbage that's going to start off the fermenting process. So as long as you just remove the outside layers and you're just a bit wary that there might be some bits of dirt when you get down to the root, then you just need to just be careful. Right. So next process is adding the salt. So the recipe is whatever weight of prepped cabbage you've got. So that's just the weight of this cabbage in here. You can't weigh the whole cabbage and then put 2% of that weight. It's the actual weight of the prepped cabbage. So I know that there is about 984 grams of cabbage there, so I need to add 2% of that weight of salt, which works out at about 19 grams. So 19 grams of salt in there. There are different ways of working out 2%. Whatever weight I've got, I always divide that number by 100, then that gives you 1%, and then you can just multiply by how many more percent you want. So add the salt, good quality salt, into the cabbage, and then you need to start mixing it by hand. You clean hands, crunching it together, and what this will do is it'll start breaking down the cabbage, not breaking it down so it falls to bits, but just and through the salt as well, it'll start releasing the water out of the cabbage. So it takes about 5 minutes, and you've just got to be careful, and you've just got to be thorough when you do this, because this is an important part. So I'll show you what kind of method I'm going to do, but I'm not going to go through the process because I don't think you want to see my 5 minutes of me crunching cabbage. So I will start the process off, and then we'll come back when it's getting to the stage where it's almost ready. Right, so start crunching the cabbage together. The salt's going to go to the bottom naturally because it's heavier than the cabbage, so you've just got to mix it together, turn it around, turn it over. As you can see, the water's already starting to come out of cabbage, and just a continual process of carrying on, and it feels like you're not getting anywhere, but all of a sudden it will start releasing all of its moisture as you start breaking it down. So I'll stop the video, you don't need to see the rest of this. Right, so I've been doing it for a couple of minutes, and you can see that there's lots of moisture, and my hands are covered in wet from the cabbage. It's all starting to want to come out now. So it's about after 2 minutes. So it needs another 3 minutes, and we'll see that it'll really start to break down, and lots of moisture will start coming out. And it's the moisture, it's the salty brine that comes out, which is what we want, because it's going to start off a fermenting process, and it'll also create this liquid that's going to stop anything else getting to the cabbage. But you'll see once I put it into the jar. As you can see now, just starting to go. So we'll pause again, and then we'll come back when it's at the final stage. Right, so as you can see, there's quite a lot of water that's now coming out of the cabbage, so we are ready to put it into the jar. You can add other things to this as well. So last time I made some, I put in some carrot as well, and it worked really well. However, I tried to make some with just carrot, and it failed. So I don't know why, but I presume that it's the bacteria in the cabbage that sets things off, and there isn't the same bacteria in carrots. So you can use carrots, but you need some cabbage in there to start off the fermenting process because of the bacteria in the cabbage that's not there in the carrots. Although I may be a little bit wrong. So I think the first jar that I got was a little bit too big, so I'm going to put it in a small jar. And if there's too much for this jar, then I'll simply save that cabbage, and then I'll add it to the red cabbage and put that in the big jar, because the red cabbage is a lot bigger than the white cabbage. So cabbage into the nice clean jar, like that. And then we're going to press it down to the bottom. So some in, out of the way for the moment. And then I've got a rolling pin, which I'm going to use to press the cabbage down. So it needs to go right down to the bottom with no airlocks. And what this will do is the cabbage will go down to the bottom, and then all the water will come to the top. So it's best to do it in processors, in a few processors, rather than just stuffing as much cabbage in as you can in one go. So press that down. Oops, set the camera up. As you can see, the water is wanting to rise to the top, and that's what you want. So I'll put some more cabbage in now. A bit more cabbage, and certainly some of that water, because otherwise there's not going to be enough water going in there. We can't fill it too full, because we need space at the top of the jar for the fermentation to start. So I think might all fit in. I think that's about it. I don't really want to put any more in than that, because it'll start coming over the top. So keep pressing in. I don't know, I think we might get it all in. Yeah, we're going to get all this cabbage in. Let's be brave. The water is the really important part, because we want the cabbage to get completely submerged underneath the briny liquid. So press down with fingers, and as you can see, all the liquid has come to the top. So we need to make sure that there's no cabbage, all the cabbage is underneath the water, and then we're going to put a layer of cling film on top. And what that will do is that will stop the cabbage from rising, because if the cabbage comes in contact with the air, then it's going to want to go off. So a bit more with the rolling pin. Fine. Right, so that there. I'll just wipe my hands and we'll come back. Right, so cabbage is now underneath the briny liquid. A piece of cling film just to fit on the top of the liquid, and what this will do, this will keep all the cabbage from wanting to rise up and get in contact with the air. If it gets in contact with the air, there's a habit that it's going to want to start going mouldy and off, which is not what you want. You want it to ferment. So a disc of cling film on top, and then what I've got is I've got a jar that's going to sit on top of there just to keep everything down and submerged. So hopefully that will work. What will happen over time is it will rise slightly. So what I'll do to keep the I'll put some water in that jar, and it'll just hold the liquid down. I think there's probably too much cabbage in there, but we'll worry about that later. Right, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it on windowsill, not in direct sunlight. It wants to be room temperature, but not with direct sunlight on it. So this process is going to happen. It's so it's going to be quicker in summer and slower in winter because of obviously the ambient temperatures in your rooms. So it just wants to be somewhere out of direct sunlight, and you're just going to leave it for at least a week. Keep an eye on it, and you'll know when it starts getting ready, because it'll start to smell fermented, and it'll start to smell like pickled cabbage, which essentially what this is. I think that's good. Yeah, it's fine. What I'll do is I'll move the camera, and then you can see what it looks like from the side. But I'll have to pause it because the camera's just a pain in the ass. Yes, there's definitely too much cabbage and liquid in there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take out some of that cabbage, so then it's got plenty of space to breathe. We don't want anything going wrong, otherwise it's a waste of cabbage. So I'll take some out, and then we'll come back. Right, there we go. That's a better level, because there's going to be starting bubbles. It's going to bubble, which will cause I don't want it to cause a mess. So we just need to poke down any bits of cabbage that aren't submerged underneath the water, like that, and then jam jar on top. Not too tight, because it wants to be able to breathe, and that will just keep the cabbage underneath the brine, and it will start the fermenting process. So we'll leave that. Keep an eye on it. It'll start to ferment in a couple of days' time, and then might be ready in a week. More likely going to be 2 weeks when it's ready this time of year. But we'll keep coming back to it. Oh, there we go. I've done the red cabbage and put some cling film on top of it, and just an old bottle that's just going to keep it weighed down, so everything's submerged underneath the liquid. We'll come back in a couple of days when it's started to ferment, and then you kind of see what might happen with the green cabbage is that it might want to lift that jar that I put in the top just to keep the cling film down. It might want to start lifting that up. So what I'll do is I'll just put a little bit of water in that smaller jar, and then I'll just hold it down. But it will start to bubble. If it starts to smell really bad, then it's failed. But it will start to smell like pickled cabbage and a little bit fermented, which is a nice thing, unless you don't like that type of stuff. But anyway, that's it for now. Right, this is the update on the sauerkraut. It's been fermenting for 4 days now, and what's happened is you can see a lot more water has split out of the white cabbage. So much so that I've had to take some of the watery brine out of the top and put it into the jar, otherwise it's in danger of spilling over. But as you can see, there's quite a lot of air pockets down there, which means it is starting to ferment, and I've smelt it, and I can smell that it's starting to smell fermented. I can't describe what fermented smells like. It's a bit like a yeasty, cabbagey kind of smell. Not unpleasant, but kind of it's starting to smell like sauerkraut smells, or pickled cabbage. That's that kind of smell. It's starting to smell like that. So what will happen now is that it'll carry on fermenting, and then all this liquid will slowly start to be sucked back into the cabbage, and it will become almost like dry on top, so there won't be any liquid kind of showing, and that's kind of how you know it's ready. You can see, you might be able to see some bubbles come up now and again. That's probably just because I've moved it more than anything else. So it's fine. It's certainly going to be another week before it's ready, but I'll know when it's ready, and I'll show you a video that all this liquid will be sucked back into the cabbage, and then we know it's ready, and then it can go into the fridge, and then we'll talk about that. Same with the red cabbage. Can you see lots of bubbles on top? We know it's fermenting. We can smell it. There's plenty of room, so I didn't need to take any of the water out of that one. Water, brine. But there you go. Same process there. That's smelling. Yep, that's smelling pickledy cabbagey. That's not even a word. But yeah, so that's working quite well. They're going to sit on for another week at least until I know they're ready, and then we can simply put them in the fridge, and not stop any further fermenting, and we'll know it's ready, and it'll keep for a good 6 months, easy peasy, in the fridge as long as it's covered and no contaminants get in there. But as it's that kind of season where we've got lots of vegetables about, cabbage, and knowing what to do with it, if you've got a big glut of it, this is a perfect thing to do. Even if you don't grow cabbage, this is just a nice, an easy way of getting into fermenting and pickling. And it's quite a cheap thing to do. So it's like £1.50 for a good sized cabbage, a little bit of salt, glass container, and away you go. You know, so it's quite a fun, cheap thing to do, and you get a delicious product at the end of it. I haven't put any herbs and spices in. I know people kind of say there's certain herbs, certain spices that you need to put in. I haven't. I've just left it plain because I want to do other things with it once it's done. Anyway, that's it for now. That's it from the week, I would say. And there we go. A week and 6 days later, and the sauerkraut is ready. As you can see, the liquid has gone. We're almost reached the top of there, and now what's happened is it's been sucked back into the cabbage, so you know it's ready. There's a little bit of liquid, but it's smelling. Is it smelling? Yeah, it smells exactly like sauerkraut should do. So therefore it's ready. So it's going to go. I'm going to cover it with a bit of cling film over the top, and then I'm going to put a lid on it, and then it's going to live in the fridge, and it will keep in the fridge for 6 months, easy peasy. The reason I put a little bit of cling film over the top is that's vinegar in there now. Well, is it, or maybe not? It's either acid or alkali, which is comes into any kind of contact with any kind of metal, and it's going to corrode it. So it's best off to have a plastic layer between that and the metal. And that's it. It's a dead easy process to do, and it's kind of like a gateway into learning how to ferment things. Cheap to do, relatively simple. Just takes a little bit of time, and then once you've mastered like the basics like that, then you can start moving on to other things. So I recommend it. It's delicious, it's cheap, and it's just like a fun thing to do. That's it for now. Possibly, I can't think of anything else to say. I probably will do as soon as I've done it off.